Heaven with your host, Christian author and PGA member John Decker. Join John as he discusses all things golf, including useful instructional techniques and tips from your swing to a better game strategy. John will also talk about the importance of his faith and how it relates to his life and golf. So if you're a Christian who loves the game of golf or wants to learn how to play it, then this is the show for you. Now, please welcome the host of Fairways to Heaven, John Decker.
Welcome to the Fairways to Heaven show. I'm your host, John Decker, and we are streaming live on Bold Brave TV. If you miss a show, please go to YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you stream your podcast to download a show. Or you can simply go to my website, deckergolf.com. Now, this website is designed to help you improve your game. So I really encourage you to go to my website because on the website, I have 7 different categories that we go over. One is full swing. So I have full swing videos. I have putting, chipping, pitching, bunker, course management, and golf fitness as well. All of these under the Decker Golf umbrella. So you're going to get a consistent message and there's no sign up. It is absolutely free. You can go on there and just browse around, look at different videos. And I encourage you to share those with your friends as well. If there's something that you're, if you find a video that you really like. And there's a lot of information on there as well about my books. So everything is on the website. So I encourage you to go there. Now, I'm also excited to announce that last week, for the first time, the Fairways to Heaven show was broadcast live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So for those of listeners out there who follow me on those platforms, welcome to the show. And we hope to hear from you during the show. Now, last week we had a great show. And we talked about the touch, and that was our theme. We talked about touch in the short game. And we started out with the instructional side, and there was 2 videos. The first video showed you 3 ways to improve your touch. So if you're struggling around the greens, I encourage you to go back and watch that show. We had a lot of great information on, really improving your touch in the short game. The other video was it was called the T drill. And basically the power in the short game comes from the body rotation. The touch comes from the arms and the hands. So the T drill is a great drill to help you with the power. So if you're struggling with your contact, if you're not hitting your pitch shots or chip shots solid, you're going to really want to watch that video as well. Our special guest last week was the director of instruction for the Columbus Country Club, and that's Chase Wilson. Chase did a fantastic job. He's a fantastic player and teacher, and he gave us some great insight tips on mentally the way he approaches a lot of his short game shots when he's playing in tournaments, but also working with his students. And I invite you, if you go to deckergolf.com, also consider going to my YouTube channel, John Decker Golf Instruction. If you go to the YouTube channel, you can see the first 5 shows. You'll get notifications if you subscribe to the channel, and I ask that you do. That way you get notifications when the show is coming out. Now, next week is April 2nd, and there is not going to be a live show. The reason is I will be leaving here from Florida, and I'll be traveling back to Ohio. So we will do an encore presentation of the premiere show, which will be aired next week on April 2nd. And then on April 9th, I'll be picking back up and we'll be going live again. And I'll be doing that from the Columbus, Ohio area. Now, today's show is coming to you live from Naples, Florida. And I'm teaching here at the Dennis Meyer Golf School. I'll be here again for the rest of this week. And then next week, I'll be heading up to Ohio. And when I get to Ohio, I will be teaching at the Medallion Club, which is in the Columbus, Ohio area. Now, if you're in different parts of the country and you want to have instruction and you want me to look at your swing, I have online instruction available as well. That online instruction is available if you go to deckergolf.com. You can click on there and send me your videos, and I'll be glad to take a look at them. Again, I'm a PGA member since 1997 and senior editor for Golf Tips Magazine, and I'm also a Christian author. Now, this show is designed to have audience participation. I know that you're out there because I'm starting to get the numbers and the show is doing very well. And I want you to participate. So please, if you have a golf question, feel free to call 1-866-451-1451. That number is on your screen. Call in and we'll try to get that question answered. If not today, in a future show. Or you can simply go to our live chat and send us a question. I'll be glad to go over that as well. Or if you want to go to deckergolf.com and email me a question, I'll be glad to answer the question on a future show as well. Now, today's theme for the show is timing. And in segment 1, we have 2 videos addressing practice time and the time of the putting stroke. So we'll be talking about timing. In segment 2 and in segment 3, we have our special guest. And today's guest is Ted Odorico. Now, Ted has been on. He was on our 3rd show. So this is his 2nd time on the show. Glad to have him back. And Ted is the founder and CEO of iGolf Sports Network and iGolfsports.com. And then in our final segment, I'm going to be talking about our time on this earth and God's time. Now, today's scripture, and every show we have has scripture, is from 2 Peter, and I'll be reading from the New King James Version. But, beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. And that's 2 Peter 3:8. Now, my pledge to you, the audience, is that this is a Christian golf show, and that every show is going to have a heavy emphasis on golf instruction. So let's get right into some golf instruction. Now, today's theme we talked about is time. And one of the things that I see a lot of people do is wasting their time when they go to the driving range. And one of the things that I want my students to do is define the time, or to define why they are at the driving range and how best to use their time. So one of the common mistakes that I see people do when they get on the driving range is they just beat balls. They hit balls as fast as they can, thinking that that's going to translate into them going out and playing better golf, when all they're doing is racing up their heart rate, becoming more anxious, and usually it leads to disaster when they get on the course. So video 1 is going to explain how the process of defining why you're at the driving range. So Caleb, let's go to video number 1, please. Hi, I'm John Decker, PGA instructor and author of the book, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game. Today I want to work with you on your time on the driving range and defining why you're there. There's 3 reasons why you should go to the driving range. Number 1 is to warm up. And the first thing I do when I get to the driving range is I start out with really small shots, just like this, to get warmed up. I hit the small shots first, and then I work my way up to the big shots. The second reason I go to the driving range is either take a lesson or to work on a lesson or to work on my swing. So I want to do this when I'm not getting ready to play. This is time maybe after work or after a round of golf where I'm specifically working on my golf swing. And the third reason I go to the driving range is to practice my play, to actually tee up with my driver and pretend I'm on the first hole and play it, and then go to my 7 or 8 iron and hit that shot, and then go to the second hole. You can actually play the golf course on the driving range. Learn to define why you're there, and you're definitely going to improve your game. One of the things that I like to do when I go to the driving range, especially when I'm getting ready to prepare for a tournament, is I will write out a things to do practice list, just like you write out a things to buy when you go to the grocery store, a things to do list of projects around the house. I've always been like that. I always like to write things down and mark them off when I do them. But I find that when I do that, I'm organized in my thoughts so that when I get to when I get to the driving range, I'm not wasting time. I'm there and I have a specific purpose in what I'm going to be doing. Now, the second video that we're going to talk about is a video that I did. I actually got a lot of this information from my mentor, Phil Rogers. It's going to talk about the constant and the variable in the putting stroke. And the constant is the time of the putting stroke, and the variable is the length of the swing. So, Caleb, let's go to video number 2, please. Hi, I'm John Decker, PGA instructor and author of the book, Golf is My Life, Glorifying God Through the Game. Today I want to work with you on your putting, and I want to talk about 2 parts of putting when it comes to the stroke itself. One is going to be the constant, and one is going to be the variable. And what I mean by this is when I'm putting, my constant is my time back into the ball. I want to go back into the ball in 1 second. It does not count my follow through. So if I have a 3-foot putt, I'm going to go 1, 2. If I have a 40-foot putt, I'm going to go 1, 2. So my constant is the time. My variable is the length of the stroke. And the reason that putting is so difficult is that you have one club that you have to make for all your putts. So when I've got a tap-in putt, I'm using my putter, and when I've got a 60-foot putt, I'm using my putter. In the full swing, I have many clubs. I have a driver, wedges, irons. So depending on the situation, I go to a different club. But in putting, so when I'm putting, I like to have a count, and I'll just count 1, 2, or swing, swing. When I was working with Bob Sowards, he would say Kentucky Blue. Whatever it is that you want, as long as that count is to the rhythm of 1 second, then that's going to be your constant. Your variable is obviously going to be the length of the of the putt that you have, and every putt is going to be different. So you're constantly having to change that variable. That's why, again, putting is so difficult. But when you think of that count, you don't think of your swing mechanics. You start getting a rhythm to your stroke, and it's great to do by putting to the fringe of the greens. That's important to help you get that speed down so that when you get out on the golf course, you have good distance control. And if you can learn to do that count, you can actually learn to put it into your pitching and your chipping and your bunker and even in your full swing. It's going to take some practice and some time, but learn to add that count in there, and that's really going to help you overall around the greens with your distance control. So we're coming up on our first break, and when we return in our next segment, we're going to talk more golf instruction with our special guest, Ted Odorico. I'm your host, John Decker, and you're watching Fairways to Heaven. We'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Fairways to Heaven. I'm your host, John Decker, and now it's time to bring in our special guest, Ted Odorico. But before I do, I'd like to just give you a brief bio on Ted. Ted is the founder and CEO of iGolf Sports Network, and I just have lost power. On and ready to go. So Ted is the founder and CEO of iGolf Sports Network and also iGolfsports.com. He is a teaching professional, and he is the host of Golf Talk Live and also the host of the Women of Golf show with Cindy Miller. So Ted, welcome back to Fairways to Heaven.
Well, thank you, John, for having me back on, and I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to it. And just on a side note, I've had the same types of issues once in a while. It's just part of the business.
Part of the business. I'm learning the ropes as we go. So no problem. Glad to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. Now, Ted, today as you kind of heard in the first segment, today's theme is we're going to talk about time. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, like, before you go play a round of golf, or it could be when you were playing tournament golf, or whether you're playing a casual round of golf, but how do you like to spend your time before you get to the range? Or were you one of those guys that like to arrive real early? Did you like to arrive, 15 minutes before your tee time? Kind of talk us through, if you were going out to play a competitive round of golf, or a round of golf maybe with some friends, and you're really excited, how do you spend your time getting warmed up and ready to go?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you. I always got early to every. I treated it like an appointment. When I was in sales for a number of years, very early on in my career, I always made a point of showing up early. I don't believe in just sort of rolling out of the car 10 or 15 minutes before you're about to go out and play golf. Slap around a couple of golf balls and then hit the first tee. You're not going to be prepared. You're not going to be, because depending on how far you're driving, you might be in the car for 30, 40 minutes or more. So you're a little bit too relaxed, and you're not really loosened up yet, ready to play. So you need to get out, and you need to warm up a little bit. And also too, sometimes what I would do, depending on how close I was to the golf course, I would actually go a little bit earlier and maybe even have a light breakfast at the golf course in the clubhouse. And then I would, go out and warm up for a little bit. And so for me, to answer your question directly, is I would show up early so that I was prepared. And when I was playing, particularly with my friends, obviously I couldn't always control some of the other factors. But when I was playing with my friends, I would, as they say, crack the whip a little bit, and they were going to join. They were going to join me early as well. So I made sure of it.
I think that's good. I like to, if I'm playing in a tournament, I like to show up about an hour and 15 minutes before my tee time. And that gives me time to go to the restroom. Normally I'm traveling, so it gives me a little extra time to stretch and kind of get the body going. And then I like to start out with the short game, really short shots around the green. I like to go to the chipping green first. I don't go and, I'm not one of these guys that's going to go grab a driver and be hitting a driver in the first 15 minutes of a warm-up session. I'm not going to be hitting a driver maybe for 45 minutes to even an hour, because I'm going to kind of slowly build myself up there. And I always use the analogy, if you go to a football game and you watch the players when they come on the field, when they're warming up, they're doing jumping jacks, and they're doing stretching, and they're doing light contact. They don't come out just hitting each other. They kind of slowly build themselves up so that when they get to the game, they're kind of peaking. You don't want to peak too early. If you start hitting the big full shots early, then you can burn yourself out by the time you get to the ninth hole, because you've hit so many shots. And that a lot of times, especially if someone's not in maybe the best of shape. So it's always good to kind of ease yourself in there. What advice would you give a player let's say that you have a student who's preparing for a tournament, And let's say that the tournament's like a week away and they're not really on their game. Is it better for that person to spend more time practicing, or is it better for that person to spend more time playing, or is it better for someone to go maybe take a lesson or something like that? And we're talking maybe you have a week or so before the tournament. What advice would you give the listeners out there?
It really depends on the level of player. Let's say we'll take a 20 handicap player who's struggling getting around the golf course. What I would do is I would not go for what I would classify as a traditional lesson. I would go, certainly if you're working with a professional, I would go for maybe a tune-up, maybe a sort of an adjustment. Say, okay, I'm having some struggles here. What can you do? I've got a tournament next week, as you know. What can we work on that I can make sure that I'm going to be playing my best? We're not going to make any drastic changes. We're not going to start fiddling around with a lot of things, because the last thing I want to do is have to be working on something new right before I'm about to play an event. But I certainly want my pro to take a look, and maybe he's noticing some things that we've worked on over the last few months that I'm slipping back into old, bad pattern habits. And so maybe he can say, hey, Ted, I see you're doing this again. We need to, get that out of the swing. So that's certainly, I think, an opportunity to have a professional set of eyes to see what you're doing right before, go out the next week. As far as practicing and things like that and playing, I think a little of both. But what I would suggest is this: don't go out and play 18 holes. Play just 9. And if you can get a chance to play once or twice before you play, the reason being is you don't need to be burning yourself out and right before you're getting ready to play an event, even the week before. So just play maybe 9 holes a few days before, just to make sure everything's firing on all cylinders. And just to touch on real quickly about what you were talking about practice, I like to tell my students, when it comes to hitting the driver or your longer clubs, leave that to the last part of your practice session. Get on the putting surface, very first thing, chipping, putting, that sort of thing, and then work into your smaller shots like your wedges and things like that. The reason why I say that is a lot of people go to the range, even especially before they're about ready to play in an event of some sort, and they start swinging the big stick right away. Well, then by the time they meander on over to the putting green, their big muscles have been engaged, they're a little bit jittery, and now all of a sudden their putting is a little bit sketchy because those smaller muscles that typically get engaged with putting and chipping and things like that have been kind of overworked early on. So now they're not as crisp with their putting or even their chip shot. So I like to say to them, before you go to the driving range, as you pointed out in your earlier parts of the segment, is have a game plan. What am I going to do? Write it down. Make a few notes. You have to write a memoir, but jot down a few notes of what it is that you want to do when you get to the range before a practice session. But I like to say practice a couple times before that week, and if you can get out and play a couple times, that's fine, but no more than 9 holes.
I think that's great advice. Typically, when I was working with Bob Sowers, we were on the PGA Tour, and when he was on the PGA Tour and I was coaching him, he would Monday would not play at all. Tuesday he would play 18 holes in the practice round, and then Wednesday he would only play 9 holes. Because he wanted to be as fresh as possible. It didn't matter whether he had an early tee time or a late tee time. Tour players are not out playing 45 holes, before their tournament. They're trying to slowly, pace themselves because they have a very long week if they make the cut. So one thing about tournament golf is, for me personally, I don't normally get a really good night's sleep the night before the tournament. You're always a little on edge. You're a little nervous. At least I was. There's some guys out there that probably can go right to sleep and it doesn't affect their sleep. So anyway, one of the questions that I had for you is, before a tournament, what do you like to do like the night before the tournament to kind of get your mind off of tournament golf? Or do you like to focus on the next day? What did you like to do?
I think it's much like you, and it's not just for tournament, but for anything that's, special that you've got planned for the next day. But in this case, obviously, we're going to talk about a tournament. I don't, losing a little bit of sleep, that's normal. I mean, if you don't have some butterflies and things like that leading up to an event, especially if it's something that's really important for you, that's not normal. Even the best of the best will tell you that there's always little butterflies churning up. So, but what I think is smart, because you have to sort of anticipate you may not get a good night's rest. So the days before that, make sure you get some really good rest. So the 3-4 nights before that night before, get as much sleep as you can, get a lot of rest. Don't overexert yourself. If you're going to go out and do some practice sessions like we talked about a moment ago, that's fine, but keep them limited. Don't go out and blow out a 2-hour practice session, 2 days before you're about to play a big event. So, I always believe in minimal, but at the same time, efficient. So as we always talk about practice with purpose, when you go out there, have a game plan when you go out there and work on specific things that you're going to need when you're out in that golf course. And a playing lesson, just to touch very quickly about the playing lesson as well. Mm-hmm. That's something I think if you're going to get together before that tournament with your coach, that would be a better opportunity than just standing on the range, hitting some balls and talking back and forth. Let him help you develop a strategy when you're out there in those 9 holes. And so that when you're getting out in that tournament, you've got, okay, now I know what I need to do. I need to focus on this as opposed to just hitting out into an open range.
I think that's great advice, Ted. And for me personally, the night before a tournament, I like to watch a movie. I like to watch something that's totally not sports related, not golf related, just some movie where my mind can get away from the tournament, where I'm not thinking about it. I don't think it's good to be focusing on your golf game the night before a tournament. I mean, it's kind of like studying for a test. If you don't know the information when you're sitting down, you can't cram it in there 5 minutes before the test. So I think that it's good for the body to be able to relax and to do, I certainly would stay away from alcoholic drinks. I learned that early on when I was when I was younger. Drinking alcohol the night before a tournament is not good for your sleep. And I would, try to encourage people to do things, take a walk, watch a movie, whatever it is that you listen to music, whatever it is that you like to do to relax. That's what I would encourage you to do.
Now, listening to music was always one for me. It was very relaxing. Yeah, it's a good one.
When you're working with a student, let's say the student goes out and they have a really poor round of golf, okay, and they play in poorly and they're really down, and we've all been there. There's been so many times I've wanted to quit this game. How do you recommend that person spend their time after the round? Are they better to just leave, go home, and say, tomorrow will be a better day? Or are they better to maybe go to the driving range, spend a little time there? Are they better to take a lesson? Is there any advice that you would give maybe a student who was serious about their game? They're trying to get better. They're really frustrated. What advice would you give them?
I think the best advice, and again, every player is different, but I think for most players, I would say, and I'm excluding professionals because obviously, Tiger and many of the others would sometimes go to the range, and if there were specific parts of their game that they were struggling with that particular day and causing them to have, I don't know if Tiger really what I would consider having a bad round, but by his standards was. But for the average amateur out there, go home. Don't spend time at the range after the round. You need to decompress from that. You need to gather your thoughts, because the problem is with that fresh in your mind, and now you're going to go out to the range and you're going to start, or you're going to try to engage in a lesson. Your coach is probably going to tell you the same thing. Listen, go home, relax, do something unrelated to golf. Just focus, watch a movie again. Do something that is going to sort of clear your mind. And then let's maybe in a day or two, then let's re-engage. Let's get back in. Let's unpack what happened, a couple of days ago. Let's talk about it a little bit. Well, it's not, so that it's like tearing a Band-Aid off a wound. If you take it off too early, you're still feeling the sting. So you want to have a little bit of time to decompress. And I think for most people, I think that's a smart play, because again, if you're trying to engage and try to tinker around with things when that difficult round is still fresh in your mind, you're not going to be able to focus on it. You're going to do it out of anger, frustration, whatever. And so you just need to sort of unpack that a day or two down the road. So just go home, relax, do whatever you do to unwind and forget about the game right now. We can deal with that in a couple of days.
Great answers, Ted. So I love those answers. And I think that it's important that when you leave the golf course, you leave it all behind. Just remember, not every day is going to be a good day on the course. And just like in life, not every day is going to be a good day. You just have to move on to the next. Well, we're coming up on our second break, and when we return, we'll continue talking with Ted about some more golf instruction. I'm your host, John Decker, and you're listening to Fairways to Heaven. We'll be right back.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Fairways to Heaven. I'm your host, John Decker, and we're talking with the founder and CEO of iGolf Sports Network, and that is Ted Odorico. And Ted, we're talking today about time, and we've talked a lot about spending your time, during the round, before the rounds, and after the rounds. But how would you, if you had a student, how would you have them spend time if they're burned out in the game? And I think burnout is something that we all go through. The longer you play this game, for a lot of times, I see a lot of times my students who are retired, and they can literally play golf every single day. And by the time July or August rolls around, they're just completely burned out. So I've got some advice that I give them, but I wanted to hear your perspective. If you had someone that's burned out, what do you tell them?
As much as I know you love the game and I love the game, even I get burnt out, and I'm sure there's moments when you do. I mean, I know we hate to say that being in the profession that we're in.
Yeah.
So, anybody listening to that portion, you might want to just mute it right now because you don't want to hear two golf professionals telling you that they get burnt. But the truth of the matter is you do. And you have to have balance in your life. And that's what I always try to tell students is to say, you have to have balance. Playing golf and getting out and practicing is fine. But if you start becoming obsessed with it and you're playing too much, even if you're retired, there's so many other things to do. I'm very fortunate. You're still right now down in Florida. I know you're heading back home in about a week's time up north. But, there's the golf down here. There's, the beaches to go along. There's all kinds of other activities to engage with, getting together with some friends and things. You don't have to make it all about golf. Now, obviously, if you're a tournament player, somebody that plays for a living, it's a little bit different. But even I'll give you a great example. Yeah. We had yesterday on my program, and I know we'll get to that a little bit later on, but we have a lot of the young ladies from the Epson Tour, and even they get burnt out. Sometimes they'll have tournaments 3-4 weeks in a row, and then they'll take a break. And I can remember a few years ago, they were really struggling because the schedule kind of got mixed up a little bit, and they had 7 events in a row. And by the time we started interviewing some of the girls a little bit later on in that schedule, they were all saying the same thing. It's like, I don't know if I can make it this week's event because they were just so burnt out. And people don't realize, they're not just playing 1 round a week. They're playing 3 or 4 rounds every week. So you start adding, and then they're practicing, and they got pro-ams and everything else going in the mix. So for me, I think it's important to have a good balanced life. Certainly, if you enjoy playing golf, getting out once, twice a week, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to play every day, that's fine. Maybe what you might want to do is mix it up, and instead of playing 18 every day, again, go back to what I said earlier. Maybe play some of those rounds. If you're playing every day, just play 9 holes, and then give yourself something else to do the rest of the day.
That's great advice. A lot of my students that I teach are retired, and so all of a sudden they have all this time on their hands. And so, what I recommend to them is like pick 2, maybe 3 days to play, kind of maybe like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it is you want to do. Pick a couple of days. So if you have 2 or 3 days of playing, maybe 1 or 2 days of practice, and one day practicing your short game, one day practicing your full swing, and then take a day or 2 off. It's like your a job, where you kind of work 5 days and you have 2 days off. I
Yeah.
think that if you can do that, to me, that's a great lifestyle for those that are retired. I think if you're looking how to balance that out, if you're trying to play golf 6 days a week, you are going to burn out. And if you're practicing 6 days a week, you're going to burn out. You got to have a blend, in my opinion. And there'll be times when you have a member guest or something where you may be playing more, and then after that, you kind of back off a little bit and kind of rest a little bit. So again, everyone's different, but that's great advice, Ted. Let's talk a little bit about teaching a student. We talked a lot about time and spending your time, but let's talk about teaching a student. And if you have a student who is too fast, so their time is too fast or their time is too slow, give us maybe some drills or ideas or things that you do to work with them.
Well, you talked about earlier in the broadcast, you were talking when you were doing, or actually in your video, the putting video, and you talked about, sort of that 1-2 cadence. And I want to go back to something I said the last time when I was on your show, and I talked about the different players. I talked about Ernie Els and Freddie Couples as an example, as 2 players that have sort of a more moderate tempo, if you will, or timing of their golf swing compared to what we see a lot on tour today. We see a lot of shorter, more compact swings. So what I like to do is what I've noticed, and I'm an observer, I'm somebody that visually watches people. And what I notice with them is they actually have, at least from my understanding, maybe they look at it differently. And I'm talking about Freddie and Ernie, but they almost have a 3 count. So their 1 goes back and they have a pause at the top, which is their 2, and their 3 is coming down. If you look at somebody that has a more compact swing, it's that 1-2. It's sort of a typical cadence, if you will, in their swing. So when I see somebody, again, that has a faster pace, and they're trying to do that 1-2, or 1-2 and then 3 down, that slower cadence, then I know that they're off. So I want to get them now. I want to transfer them into that 1-2. So I just want you going back in 1, down in 2. If the opposite is true, if they're a slower cadence and they're trying to go 1-2, it's throwing them off their rhythm. So what I want to do is, again, as I said the last time, is I want to get them swinging at a slower speed, very slow, maybe at 50% of their normal golf swing. So that way we can kind of make sure we really isolate where is the breaking point, where is the point in their swing where they're starting to kind of get a little off balance. So if their slower swing is coming back and suddenly their timing is getting out, then I know that they're typically somebody that has a very quick cadence because they're not used to that slow. If somebody, on the other hand, seems to be pretty normal at 50%, then I know that they typically have something like a Freddie or an Ernie Els thing. So I like to look at it as sort of 2 different cadence. I like the 1-2 for somebody with a quicker swing, and for somebody that has a little slower tempo or timing, that 1-2-3. And once they get into that pattern, it's actually pretty easy for them to be able to do. I know there's a myriad of things that you can do, but that's what I like to do is if you slow the swing down and really feel the swing, don't think about swing thoughts, just the club's going back and it's coming through. If you're pausing at the top, then that means that if you're trying to do a 1-2, it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
So you need to do that 1-2-3. And that's probably the easiest way I can explain it.
Yeah, it's everyone's different, and like I've noticed, I've had students who are beginners who have beautiful tempo, but the majority of them don't. The majority of them are either too fast or too slow. So identifying that, and there's a lot of young teachers out there maybe that are just getting into teaching. I think that that's one of the key things to identify right off the bat. Don't
Yeah.
get so wrapped up in just teaching positions, but the time and the flow. If you can get a student's timing down, then their golf swing is going to improve right away, even if they have flaws. So these are things that, great tips, and hopefully that'll help some listeners out there. I want to talk a little bit with you, Ted, about your faith, and how you spend time during your life. I know that you're a Christian. We've had many discussions off air about this, but like, how do you spend your time with the Lord?
For me, and I'll be completely honest about it. I've always found it very difficult, and that's not to say that I don't read the Bible, but
Yeah.
I can't delve into chapter and verse. Some people can sit, for an hour and they do a morning Bible study. I've always found that very difficult for me because let's be honest, the Bible sometimes can be very confusing to read if you're not doing. And obviously, the more you do it. And again,
Yeah.
as I said earlier, I'm a visual person, so I like to, I will watch some preachers on television. As an example, I'll listen to their message,
Hmm.
and obviously I have to be careful because there's some have their own agenda and whatever. So you have to be very careful about that. I like to go to. Obviously, I go to church and hear the messages there and that, and I do read the Bible. I just don't do it. Again, everybody's different, so you have to find what works best for you. But I like to spend time throughout the day. Some people like to get up first thing in the morning. I know, my girlfriend Carol kind of does her own little personal Bible study every single morning before she starts her day. That has never really been for me something that works. So I like to throughout the day. I sort of in my mind and internally, I will talk to God. I will ask God for direction, and I will say to Him, because He knows what's on my heart. He knows what's in my mind. I don't really even have to ask. He already knows, but I'll do it anyways, just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
And what I will do is I will say, you know what, is this going in the right path for me? And how is it going to glorify you in the process? What am I doing? Is it pleasing to you? And usually, sometimes it doesn't come right away. Sometimes it might be a few days later, but I'll usually get some sort of a sign or a signal that I'm moving in the right direction. And if I'm not, then I kind of right in the pit of my stomach, I'll have that sense. And I know that that's the Lord talking to me.
Yes.
I do pray. I do pray fairly, regularly in that. I just have it a little bit different approach than some do. And again, you have to find what works for you, but it is important, I think, to have a strong faith in whatever you do, whether it's in your business life, your personal life. And I think it's important to do that.
Well, it's a relationship, it's a
Yeah.
relationship with the Lord. And, can you imagine having a relationship with someone and they say, I want to have a relationship with you, Ted, but I never want to talk to you. That wouldn't really be a relationship. So a relationship is when you have, it's one thing I love about Carla. Carla and I, we have a relationship where we can communicate. My relationship with the Lord is different. Sometimes we'll pray together, before meals or something, if there's something we're particularly praying about. And then other times, my relationship is just myself and God. And I like to sit in a quiet area. I like to
Yeah.
be as quiet as possible, because when things are quiet around me, when I'm still and when I'm listening and paying attention, I can really feel the presence much more than if I'm in a hectic area. But sometimes it's good to pray if you're in traffic, or if you're in an area where maybe you're around people. That's okay as well. But having that relationship and that communication is important. We've
Let me,
got just
John.
a little. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
let me
ahead.
just add real quick. One of the things that I like to do, as I said, being down in the Gulf, is I would walk along the beach for quite a
Oh yeah.
distance. And
Yeah.
for me, that was very, it wasn't a matter of, I didn't care about the scenery so much. It was very peaceful, of course. Or we have some good walking trails nearby. That's where I would really do a lot of my deep communication and thoughts and prayers with the Lord, because for me, it was quiet. It was something that was very peaceful, and it put me in a relaxed mode, if you will. And I
Mhm.
was more receptive to hear what He had to tell me.
Exactly. Well, I think that's great. Great information, Ted. So, Ted, in the little bit of time that we have left here, I- is there anything about iGolf? We have about a minute left.
Sure.
Just give us some information on iGolf and golf tips and everything. If there's anything you want to promote, I know you have a book out as well. The floor is yours for the next minute or so.
All right. So iGolf Sports, of course, is my company, and it's sort of an umbrella company of a lot of different things that I do. My teaching, obviously, Golf Tips Magazine, which is changing now into a completely online platform. We're not publishing the actual magazine in print and or even digital anymore. We've moved everything to an online. It's a subscription-based website. I encourage you to check it out. Go to golftipsmag.com. The bulk of the site is free, but there are some premium perks in there as well for those that you want to become members. And obviously all of the digital issues of the magazine have been uploaded into the website and are available for premium members. As far as my podcast, of course, I've got two weekly podcasts, the Women of Golf Show, which I do every Tuesday mornings with my friend, co-host LPGA professional Cindy Miller. We have a great time. We interview a lot of the young ladies from the Epson Tour, certainly some regular LPGA players and Legend Tour players as well as a myriad of industry professionals that are there to help elevate women's golf. And then Thursday night, John, I know you're going to be joining me tomorrow night on my premium show, Golf Talk Live, on the Coach's Corner panel. That's become a favorite with the audience, where I invite a lot of pros like John and others to talk about a variety of different topics. We have a great discussion. And of course, we're going to have a lot of fun. And if you want to find these podcasts, go to our YouTube channel, iGolf Sports. You can find both podcasts there in the video version or Spotify. And if you're interested in just the audio version, if you go to Spreaker.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, they're uploaded there as well. So they're available in all different types of formats, all different type of platforms. But iGolf is on the YouTube channel and also on Spotify. You'll see both of those podcasts available there.
Well, thank you, Ted, for being on the show today. And it's now time for our final break. And when we return, I want to talk about our time on this earth and God's time for our lives. You're watching the Fairways to Heaven show, and I'm your host, John Decker. We'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to the Fairways to Heaven show on Bold Brave TV. I'm your host, John Decker. And special thanks to Ted Odorico for coming on today. He did a great job, and I really appreciate his time today. Now I want to talk about our time, our life's time, and I also want to talk about God's time with that. A lot of this information I'm going to be giving you is from chapter 26 of my book, Fairways to Heaven, One Shot at a Time. That's my second book. And this is chapter 26. And the title for that chapter is Ready, 1, 2, Swing, Swing. Now, I remember the very first time that I taught or worked at Phil Rogers Golf School. I was a range assistant at the time, and range assistants would come in, and school assistants, we would come in very early in the morning. We would get the bags for the golfers for the school. We would set them up. We'd set the chairs up, get their books out there, get everything organized, and then we would assist the head instructor. We would assist them, and whenever Phil would come in, and the first time I ever worked with him, I sat there just like a kid, listening to Santa Claus. I was just in awe of his teaching and his stories, and so I'm sitting there listening to him do this presentation. And one of the things that he talked about is the putting stroke. Is he talked about the constant and the variable, and the constant was the time back into the ball. We talked about this in the first segment, and we actually at Grand Cypress did research, and we found that the top 20 putters in the world, we filmed them with high-speed video and looked at their time back into the ball. So the putter going back into the ball. And we found that the tour players took about 1 second on average. Some were a little faster, like Nick Price and Paul Azinger were faster, and Don Pooley and Bob Murphy were slower. But if you looked at Tom Kite, if you looked at Greg Norman, they were kind of in the middle, and they were back into the ball in that 1 second. So teaching, that was one of the first things that, from putting standpoint that I heard was that count, and we talked about. Phil also talked about a natural acceleration. A natural acceleration is when the putter is naturally swinging. You're not forcing it. We never want to force the acceleration to the ball, nor do we want to decelerate. Sometimes people will decelerate. They'll put the brakes on right before they hit the ball. They won't let the putter naturally swing. So we wanted to really engage where the putter is, or the player is swinging the putter back and through the ball, and the ball just kind of gets in the way. So what Phil would do is he would stand out there on the edge of the green, and he would have all the students, and imagine 8 students standing out into about 20 feet away from him, and they've got about 20 balls in front of them. And every student is setting up, and Phil would go, ready. And then he would go, 1, 2, swing, swing. Ready was like the music conductor telling the orchestra he's ready. The 1, 2 was getting everyone on the beat. And then the swing was the actual time. So you swing back, and then you swing to the ball. And you don't just stop at the ball. You naturally accelerate. Just let the putter swing right through the ball. Now, obviously, the length of the swing depends on the length of the putt. Now, I was watching this, and after about 5 minutes, I would watch him teach total beginners to maybe men or women who were better players. And within 5 to 10 minutes, they were all on his beat. They were all rolling the ball to his feet. And the balls were like marching up there together. It was incredible. So I said, I've got to try this. So after work, I went to my car. I got my putter. I went to the putting green. I got 20 feet from the fringe, and I just wanted to roll the ball to the fringe to get my distance control down. And I did the count in my head. And when I did it, all of my balls came up short. And so after a few minutes, I said, well, this doesn't work. I'm not going to do it. Well, the next day, I watched Phil do the exact same presentation. And when I watched him do that presentation, I realized something. His count was different than my count. I'm from the South. I talk slower. So I had a slower count than his count. Once I got my count on the conductor's count, I was very good. And then all of a sudden, I was able to apply that into all aspects of my game. We all need a conductor, and my conductor is Jesus Christ. When I get in tune with Jesus Christ, when I put my life in his hands, I'm on his beat, and I have a natural acceleration in my life. Today's scripture is, but beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. And that was 2 Peter 3:8. Well, if you go to verse 9, the next one, and this won't come up on the screen, but the next verse says, the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that we should perish, but that we all should come to repentance. And what means, what Peter's talking about here is he's talking about the second coming of Christ. And what he is doing is he's talking about that time that we are waiting. Now, remember, when Peter wrote this, Jesus had just been crucified. So this was, years, it was during Peter's lifetime that he wrote this. Well, Jesus was crucified over 2,000 years ago. Well, if you listen to what Peter says and the Lord says, one day is like 1,000 years to God. So if Jesus has been crucified for 2,000 years, that means from God's perspective, his crucifixion was 2 days ago. And when you think about that in our lifetime, if you look at our lifetime, and when I was going through difficult times, the most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my lifetime was my divorce. When I went through my divorce, it felt like it was taking forever. But from God's perspective, it was only taking seconds. And so now when God was with me during those difficult times, he got me through those difficult times. He led me during those difficult times. So I know that when the difficult times come again, and I know they're going to come, when they come again, I know that he's proven that he will be with me. And so when I read this scripture, it makes me realize that the time that we have on this earth is so minute. If I live to be 100, a lot of people say, well, you've had a very long life. Well, from God's perspective, that means I've lived 1/10 of a day from his perspective. So, let's try to all have a conductor, have Jesus Christ be your conductor. And through that, you have repentance. We have this time now, in this time that we have on this earth, to repent of our sins, to put our life in his hands. And if we do that, the conductor will lead us to a natural acceleration of our life, where we have a natural flow to our life. Well, once again, we've reached the 18th hole of today's episode. Thank you for watching the Fairways to Heaven show on Bold Brave TV. We'll see you next week when once again we glorify God through the game of golf, one show at a time. Until next time, I'm your host, John Decker. God bless.
This has been Fairways to Heaven with host John Decker. Tune in each week for the very best in the game of golf, including fundamentals and solid game advice that John will share for a better and more satisfying game. Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.